People will forget what you say. They will forget what you do. They will not forget how you made them feel, right? And so when you walk into a space, again, to your point, theme, colors, branding, all that stuff, yeah, wonderful, great. But how are you making me feel? And if you have your attendees, if majority of your attendees, listen, you're never going to make everybody happy, but if you majority of your attendees walk into your experience and they feel like they belong and they feel like you thought of them, that is half the battle.
Yeah.
And so I think we just have to do a better job. Not a better job. I take that back. We have to just continue to do a good job of creating that space of belonging for everyone.
Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Keynote Curators podcast. I'm Seth Dechtman, your Keynote Curator. Our guest today is Tavar James. Tavar, welcome to our podcast.
Thanks so much. I'm happy to be here.
It's great to have you here. I know you have a recent change and a transition professionally. You're now the head of events at BetterUp. You shared a little bit with me about how excited you are about it and how you feel really dialed into their mission, which has to do with human transformation. Would you share your view or kind of what's going on right now in your professional and personal life with regard to connecting humans, transforming the human experience, and your role at your new organization, BetterUp?
Yeah, for sure. I think post-pandemic, people have been struggling with this paradigm of self while still connecting with human beings, but how do we connect with human beings and how do we keep connections in the post-pandemic world where we all have learned these new habits or these new comfort places of loneliness or solitude, right? So we've spent months of solitude, we've spent months of mastering solitude, and now we have to kind of unlearn that and get back to learning how to connect and communicate with people. And so for me, being in the events world, it gives me a platform and a space to expose that through different experiences, whether it be with BetterUp or my previous organization, but just in general with events, I find that we are in a very unique place in our industry where people are leaning on us to be the answer to that post-pandemic question of how do we get people to unlearn such strong solitude and get back to in-person experiences and connecting in person? Because believe it or not, despite the fact that we're seeing registration numbers and attendee numbers for events get back to pre-pandemic highs, there are a lot of people that are still very nervous, scared, or uncomfortable with being in person. And so it's up to us in our industry to kind of unpack that and give people the space and opportunity to get back to connecting. And that rings true to me even here at BetterUp, because, BetterUp is all about human transformation, the positive psychology, and really just giving people the tools and resources they need to just be better at their everyday life, both personally and professionally. And so what better mission and what better North Star to weave into in-person experiences when you're surrounded by so much positivity and so much uplifting sentiment. And so I'm very passionate about it. I've always been passionate about in-person events. In fact, when we were going through the pandemic at the financial services firm that I was working at before, I definitely was one of those events professionals that was struggling a little bit because I was always traveling and on the road. And that's what kept me motivated by going to different industry events and connecting with different luminaries and different industry peers. And so when that was taken away from me, I definitely struggled. And so now that we are back to somewhat pre-pandemic levels, I'm very eager and dedicated to reminding people of why it's so important to protect the human connection as much as possible, especially in a world of virtual this and virtual that, especially in a world of AI. We have to make sure that we are true advocates for human in-person connection where you can see emotion, see response, feel response, because human beings are just a ball of energy. And there's just so much you can feel through a screen. There's just so much you can feel through a text or through a phone call or through a social media app. So we've got to get out of that and get back into spaces where you can feel people's energy. I think that's where people thrive the most. So I'm big on that.
I mean, we are social animals. We're mammals.
Yeah.
And, that need to connect is just innate in us. It's in our DNA, it's in our makeup, it's in our evolutionary kind of progress.
Mhm.
It's interesting because I've often said events are a vehicle or can be a vehicle. They're like a vessel, and they can be this magical place for human connection.
Absolutely.
And there are a lot of terms as an event professional who's been in this for a long time, Tavar, you hear about activation, engagement, meaningful connections, being creative, on site, off site,
Yep.
shorter keynotes, get rid of the panels, interactivity, all these kind of things. Here's a dichotomy or a little bit of a paradox. Many attendees go to events and still feel alone.
Mhm.
How do you address that?
I'll be honest with you, I'm one of them. I'm naturally an introvert. And so I think people like me, when we go to events, as there's so much stimulation and so many options to do so many things that no matter what you throw at us, we still naturally go back to being introverts. What I think that we have to do a better job of at events is, and we're getting there, people are trying. There are a lot of people out there that do a really, really good job of this. There's a lot of organizations that still need to kind of catch up. But we have to continue to diversify the experience. And if you've heard me speak at other podcasts or virtual events, you've heard me say this before. Diversifying the experience is so important. It's important to make sure that every single person that attends your event feels like they belong. And that includes the introverts and the extroverts. That includes the social butterflies and the people that need a moment to recharge. That includes the people that drink and the people that don't drink. That includes the millennials and the Gen Zers. You have to find a way to kind of touch almost every part of your audience and make sure that everyone feels a sense of belonging. Because I think the more that we do that, the more you will find that people will be more comfortable going to events, knowing that in this sea of stimulation, I know I will find something for me. Not only do we have to do a better job of diversifying the experience, we have to do a better job of promoting, communicating that experience. Different cultural observances. If your event falls over a specific cultural observance, you need to communicate what you're doing so that people who are practicing that specific culture know that there is something at your event for them. So it's not just doing it, it's communicating it, it's promoting it, it's walking the talk. It's really creating a sense of belonging for every single person that you feel may be attending your event. Now, this takes research, right? This takes unpacking your demographic, unpacking your attendees. You don't want to waste money and resources on things that no one in your attendee list or no one from your attendee group is going to actually do, right? So you have to do the research. You have to really take the time to analyze and understand your attendees. But once you've taken the time to analyze and understand your attendees, you need to take the proper steps to make sure that there is a sense of belonging for that profile of attendees so that people feel a sense of belonging and that they're excited to go. I, for one, have had to work on my extroverted tendencies over the years because of what I do. I have to be able to talk to people and mingle and network and things of that sort. But I'll be honest with you, I go to an event and after about 30, 45 minutes of shaking hands and walking around with my drink and my canapes, I'm looking for a corner to escape,
Yeah.
And people will tell you, oh my God, Tavar, I never knew you were an introvert. I would never think. And most introverts, you don't think because we're really good at turning it on when it needs to be turned on. But we also need to have that time to recharge. So I'm always looking for a corner where I can just
Yeah.
sit and just recharge. And so even things like that, right? Like creating a space for those introverts to kind of just relax and recharge, call it a recharge zone, call it whatever you want to call it. But for me, if I went to an event and they had that space where I can go for 15 minutes in silence and recharge, I kid you not, that's something I would remember forever. How
Yeah.
about that? You know what I mean? So it's
Right.
that sense of belonging for everyone.
And that has nothing to do with the theme, the
Nope.
content, the keynote, a breakout,
Nope.
getting a CEU, an
Nope.
activation offsite. That has to do with the psychology of the event and keeping people stimulated, which taking away stimulation
That's it.
and
Yep.
letting you recharge is actually, in an ironic way, stimulation. And I'll tell you, Tavar, recently I was at a couple of events. I go to events like you do all the time. You're not the first meeting professional who is a veteran meeting professional, albeit you're a young man,
Started young.
young at heart, that has unsolicited shared with me that they're an introvert.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yet I never, and I've known, I'm thinking of a person in particular for over 10 years, and I never would have guessed it. So I've heard the term ambivert,
Mm.
right? I would also fold in something that I learned earlier in the week from somebody who is very plugged into event experiences and having spaces where you can recharge. And we had a health and well-being, a naturopath on our podcast who talked about grounding, like physically bare feeding and getting on the ground. Especially you and I spend a lot of time in airplanes and conference centers and everything. What about having a recharge space that you bring in some sod, actual
Mhm.
real grass, you put your shoes in a cubby hole and you get grounded?
Yeah.
That would be a memorable one too, you
Listen,
know?
people will forget what you say. They will forget what you do. They will not forget how you made them feel, right? And so when you walk into a space, again, to your point, theme, colors, branding, all that stuff, yeah, wonderful, great. But how are you making me feel? And if you have your attendees, if majority of your attendees, listen, you're never going to make everybody happy, but if you majority of your attendees walk into your experience and they feel like they belong and they feel like you thought of them, that is half the battle.
Yeah.
And so I
Yeah.
think we just have to do a better job, not a better job. I take that back. We have to just continue to do a good job of creating that space of belonging for everyone.
Yeah, and then there's a lot of layers of that. When they feel like they belong, then they feel known or
Yep.
heard or
Yep.
seen, and it's disarming. Then they're less constrained, they're more fully self-expressed, which kind of brings us back to BetterUp and this human transformation, which from what I understand, I know it's a new organization for you, and dial me in here where I'm wrong, but and you said it earlier in our conversation, but these are providing people with the tools and resources to expand their capacities and
Mhm.
be more fully self-expressed. So it's unconstraining. You can still be an introvert
Mhm.
and be unconstrained
Mhm.
whilst you're an introvert.
Yeah.
And I know you've had quite an experience of professional, your career path, or let's just call it a through line, like a script, like they call it on a Broadway or in a
Yeah.
TV show or in the play. The Ritz Carlton. You worked for financial services organization. Now you're here dealing with human transformation. How do you blend that through line and all these kind of, let's say, inflection points into making an event memorable and have it stand out?
I've always said that there are certain elements to events that are just universal. And there are certain elements to being in events that transcend between industry to industry. And one of the things that I try to do, no matter what industry or company I work for, is I try to make sure that at the center of what I'm doing is I'm creating spaces and places for people to connect and experience a wide range of different experiences, right? So it's like I'm not coming in there to necessarily beat the brand to death and shove it down people's throats. I'm not necessarily there to drive home life insurance and the importance of life insurance. Like there are people that do that, product marketers, whatever the case may be. My job is to create space for people to come in and experience something that connects them to the brand, to the product, to the people, whatever the case may be. But my job is to create that place and that space for them to do that. And most of the time, you hope that while doing that, the experience that comes out of it is something positive, something uplifting, something amazing, something memorable. And so I try to focus on that when I go from job to job or industry to industry, or even when I'm consulting and I'm, just giving people advice about their events. I always try to remind our events folks to be stewards of the business and understand your product and understand your company's mission, understand your brand voice, all that fun stuff. But always remember that at the core of what you're supposed to do, you are supposed to be the subject matter expert in creating that place and that space for people to connect and experience something. And your hope is that the experience will be something positive, amazing, uplifting. And that's what I try to do. And that's what I try to keep close to me. I've always said that events professionals are master artists at creating places and spaces that ignite a spectrum of experiences. That's what I consider events professionals to do. I do believe that. I strongly believe that we are master artists that connecting people in places and spaces that ignite a spectrum of experiences. And that is what I want us to remember at our core, is that you are there to create space in places that ignite a spectrum of experiences, regardless of the industry or regardless of the brand or regardless of what products they may be pushing. And the reason why I say that is because I am very fortunate in my career that I have been able to go from industry to industry, from vertical to vertical, right? I went from hospitality, where I worked on a number of different events, from American Idol to the Brooklyn Nets to different productions on Fox Studios. I was able to do a lot of work within hospitality because of the partnerships that the different hotel brands that I worked with had. And then I went into financial services, where I was able to build a pretty robust experiential marketing and corporate events function at the financial services company. Then I went from financial services to tech, which was digital commerce. And then I went from one tech company to now I'm at another tech company. And so I've had the opportunity to have a very diverse background of events, which has helped me to realize, like, it doesn't really matter what industry you work for. Your focus as an events professional, as an experience master, is to just build awesome experiences for people at whatever organization you're part of. Now, with that comes a lot of tactics, comes a lot of skills. Some of those skills need to be fine-tuned for different industries. Your approach may need to be fine-tuned for different stakeholders. Your knowledge of products and your suite of products may need to be fine-tuned depending on the industry you work for. But for the most part, our focus, our goals, our mission as events professionals at any organization is pretty much the same. And so I say all that to say, if you're watching this and you are just getting started in the events industry and you really don't know which way to go or what vertical you want to work in, you don't need to decide right now. Find a vertical, find a company that you can believe in, find a company that, you believe in their mission and you can stand firmly in what they're doing and it aligns with you morally, and go for it. Because that's how you learn, and that's how you really realize, hey, wait a minute, I'm not a one-trick pony. I don't have to do events in just fashion. I don't have to do events in just tech. The things that I'm doing, it transcends from industry to industry. I can do this anywhere. And that is your superpower as an events person. People don't realize it, but that is your superpower.
Yeah. There's a universality to it. And, I love that phrase. You should trademark it. Say it one more time.
Events professionals, we are master artists at connecting people in places and spaces that ignite a spectrum of experiences.
It's fantastic. I hear that. And again, in today's world, events, I'll use the metaphor, the vehicle and vessel spaces. You've seen chief event officer thrown out, and there is a strong movement, a lot of energy and good positive energy. And I think at the right time around activations and engagement and meaningful connections at events. And I've seen event professionals, as you say, across all verticals, all industries plug into this. There is a balance in an artisanal way, as a carpenter or an artist or a sculptor or a painter. You're creating that space for people to have this real meaningful connection that ultimately, bringing it back to BetterUp, ultimately will create transformation as people connect at an event, whether it's on business, personal level, or both. They'll be able to, maybe do a transaction or mentor or support one another in that way. I often find sometimes there are designs and activations and experiences that overshadow the core virtue of the human connection. So you come in and it's almost like a distraction from, again, you don't want to shove the insurance or whatever brand product down their throat, but at the same time, we're going to have XYZ activation and it's stimulating and everything, but then it's actually a detour from some meaningful connection.
Oh, absolutely. I totally understand. I'll give you a good example of, and I'm not just saying this because I work for the company. I'm honestly saying this because it's truly how I felt. In fact, I experienced the event as an attendee as part of my first week with BetterUp, but I attended Uplift, which is our flagship event every year. And I kid you not, I have never experienced a conference in my life that did such a great job of blending brand, product, networking, and emotion. It was truly mind-blowing.
And if I may just say, among the world of connect, engage,
Yeah.
all these names, uplift actually just sounds
Yeah.
fresh.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Just on the most simple semantical way, just
Yeah.
from that point of departure, I'm already in,
And I'll tell you now, it's as cheesy as this may sound, you really do feel uplifted while you're there. I have never experienced a conference where there is such a healthy intersection of EQ and IQ, and you feel it across every person you walk past, across every networking experience, the conversations you overhear, the smiles, the energy is just so positive. And you don't have to jeopardize or you don't have to reduce the brand or the product or the content to make that happen. Like I think
Right.
sometimes we go into these events and we're like, oh, let's just, you know, have this band perform, have Blink 182 hit the stage and then have this A-list celebrity hit the stage and then just give people a bunch of swag and everybody will be happy. And that works for some brands, right? But it's very, very unique when you can find a conference that blends all of the key components of the human interaction so well. And I kid you not, Uplift did such an amazing job. I left that experience motivated, encouraged, excited. I almost had to ask my boss, like, what do you need me for? Like, I
Right.
kid you not. I started to scratch my head in the Uber to the airport, like, what do they need me for? Because this was an
Right.
amazing production.
You're like, and now I'm here for what
Exactly.
exactly?
But I say all that to say I totally agree with you that sometimes we get too caught up in the glitz and the glamour and the fun stuff, and we overcompensate for some of the basics that people want, right? Sometimes people just want to sit at a fireside with some s'mores and just
Mhm.
give them a topic to talk about and let people
Yeah.
just talk freely, right?
And maybe in that simple case, s'mores, how you give the topic to talk about, there might be an opportunity there to be really creative. I've seen
Yeah,
buttons or
intentional.
cards or
Yeah,
you
yeah, yeah.
choose it at register. That's something, but the how
Yep,
is not the protagonist. You
yep.
know what I mean?
I absolutely know what you mean. And I think that people are going to have to get better at that because attendees are getting smarter. They can start to see through the smoke and mirrors when it comes to these conferences and what people are really trying to throw at them. And so we as events professionals, we have to get smarter and more intentional in how we connect with our stakeholders around building some of these experiences to make sure that people are not looking at our attendee list or looking at our registration sites and calling BS, right?
Yeah.
Registration fees are going up. The cost to travel is going up.
Food
Um,
and beverage,
food and beverage
hotels,
is going up.
ground trip.
Everything is going up. People are
Uh,
starting families. People can't be away from their families for so long. So to get someone out of their home to spend money, travel, be away from their family, you have to put something very compelling and very genuine in front of them.
yeah.
It can't be a bunch of smoke and mirrors. You can't put lipstick on an ugly pig. You have to make sure that whatever you're selling per se, or whatever you're trying to attract them to, that it's real. And when they step foot on site, that they feel it instantly. And it's going to be a struggle moving forward, especially we're in a time now where people have so much access to things, right? You can't hide behind a bad review anymore because people can't find it. You go on Instagram or you go on TikTok or you go on X or Twitter, whatever it's called now, and you can quickly find feedback reviews on any type of experience, right? We don't have that time to go from experience to reviews and try to clean it up, right?
That's
Like
right.
it's instant. People
Yeah.
go on live and they will instantly share an experience. So we just have to be better at intentionality and being genuine in what we're putting in front of people and
Yeah.
making sure we deliver on what we promise.
Yeah. And simple can be potent, but
Yeah.
simple doesn't have to be simplistic. I don't know. I'm playing with words a little
No, it's
bit.
true.
In the world of keynote speakers, which is the world that I'm saturated and love being immersed in, because like you with BetterUp, I believe a speech can change the world. And if it changes one person, it has the ripple effect. And you might have heard a message your whole life from your mentor, your coach, your person that you lean on. And then you hear the same message in a new voice in a different time where you're more mature, literally the same idea, and it might make a difference then. So,
Mhm.
continuing on with this line of thinking where there's more at stake, I have the good fortune of have been doing this for 20 years and in all industries, in all budget points, and all different types of smaller multi-thousand events. I know you worked in the NBA and American Idol, and you have a breadth of experience, so you might be able to relate to a little bit of this. I've heard from executives before that, oh, we want a speaker. We want to give our attendees access to people that they normally wouldn't have access to.
Yeah.
And that might have been valuable in the 70s, 80s, even the 90s. But, especially some of these higher end events where you have high performers, they've been to the Masters, they've
Hmm.
been at the VIP
Hmm.
suite at the Super Bowl, they've done backstage at Jazz Fest in New Orleans. I mean, other than being up on the space station, a lot of these people have had, a lot of these attendees have had some really rich experiences. It's counterintuitive. And in my world, it might actually be a lesser price point, but I'm always like, okay, how about we blow that idea up and just
Hmm.
bring in something that is really rich? It doesn't even have to be of the moment. It could be a speaker that had an event happen 10 years ago or 10 weeks ago or 20 years ago, but how they speak, how they frame it with the audience, the mood of the industry, what the initiatives are, where the organization is going, that might actually be the fit. Not that we're going to get Mario Andretti, Will Smith, Martha Stewart, or whomever,
Yeah.
right?
No, it's true. It's connectivity and it's hitting home, I think is what people want. They want speakers and they want people that they can relate to. That the goal or the mission or the story that this person on this stage is telling, it's attainable. It's not so far-fetched because they're an A-list celebrity and I'm never going to get to that point. I'm never going to win an Oscar. I'm never going to win a Grammy. That's just not in my cards, right? But this person, I can get there. He or she is a lot more realistic when I look at my future and my goals and the things that I want to accomplish. And I do think there is something to say for that pocket of speakers that are a little less about the A list and more about the hey, I did it and you can do it too. And that I've been at many conferences, I've planned many conferences where we've shifted our focus from the A list celebrities to luminaries or people that are a little bit more relatable or a little bit more approachable. And like, I kid you not, our survey responses have always been higher for people
Yeah.
like that.
I think non A-listers or maybe I'll just say lesser known. When you have an A-lister, one of the most important drivers as far as the success and really the focus of connecting with the attendee is more often than not a moderated conversation and who the moderator is. Because you're going to do your pre-work. Often the questions need to be vetted out, which is totally fine. And you're going to have some guidelines and some guardrails in the questioning. But if you have a big A-list personality and you don't have the proper moderator, things can go sideways pretty quickly. And you're not going to bring in, I'm picking on him a little bit. I've booked him, several times, Will Smith. He might have some insights to talk about the A business, tech or financial services or whatever, but you're literally not bringing that type of person out to talk about tech business or financial services, sharing the through line of the story and leave the attendees who are intelligent and creative to connect
Hmm.
his story and his
Hmm.
transformation along the way. We've had Jim Cameron, Manny Pacquiao, Shaquille, Mr. Magic Johnson, on and on. But you need that moderator to
I agree.
maintain that connection.
Yeah, and I'm not gonna. I'm not against A list at all. I can't be like at Uplift. We had Tracy Ellis Ross, we had Mindy Kaling, we had Adam Grant, we had Brene Brown. So it works. But
Yeah.
every single one of those people that I just mentioned had a moderator. So
Yeah.
to your point, it's important that there is a moderator who can kind of weave in the tonality and the theme of the conference and what the attendees are really trying to get out of it. Because most of the time when you pair these A-list or these, to your point, more well-known speakers, when you pair them with a moderator that can kind of guide the conversation, you get so much more out of it because you're not leaving it up to them to figure it out on their own. And you can't expect them to figure it out on their own
Yeah.
because they're a part of your company. So it's important.
Yeah, no, and I'm on this kick right now myself because, I've been doing these podcasts and I really enjoy them. I love them. I love talking about ideas and I love talking about, business and transformation and the human condition. And I feel like I've expanded my capacity. I still feel like I'm in single A ball, if I'll use that metaphor. But I see moderators that I hire and the legwork that they do to make it. Adam Grant could go up and do this self-sustained keynote presentation. It could be impeccably
Oh,
brilliant. Brene, connect on word one and
mhm.
transformative, right? When you bring in a moderator, they have to inhabit what BetterUp is up to
Yep.
and move the ball forward.
Yep.
And I'm going to take this out on a limb a little bit. I've been looking a lot at old David Letterman's and Johnny Carson's. When you have David Letterman and Cher or Madonna or Prince are in their peak in their heyday, albeit it's recorded, but it's live, you don't know what you're getting.
Right.
And the
Very
way
true.
that he handles, like Madonna will throw an F bomb and Cheryl, you know, maybe show a little skin or something, the beauty of their preparation and the mastery of how they still maintain moving the ball forward and having that guest be connected with
Mhm.
what they're doing and trying to achieve. It's just brilliant. And I've
Yeah.
seen it at keynotes
Yeah.
where we had Jack Welch, who's passed on, but it was very quickly turning into the Jack Welch show,
Yeah.
which some people might love that.
Right.
And we had a great moderator. We had Charlie Gibson, and he just kind of absorbed, but kept it going forward. And you could see, if you watch the video, how he kind of trimmed it all away and he got him really focused. It's just brilliant. So,
And on the other side of that, sometimes you get these more well-known speakers and they knock it out of the park, and your audience leaves feeling more connected to them than they thought they would be, right?
right,
And so that's the
right.
other side of it. It's like, wow, now these people will always remember, yeah, I went to Uplift 2024 and
Yeah,
crap, I didn't know that Tracy Ellis Ross was so connected to human transformation in her own way, right?
right,
I didn't know that she connects so much to our mission. I didn't know as a coach that she connects so much to this world of positive psychology and helping people develop themselves personally and professionally through her hair care line, right? But
right.
now, no, and now I'm a huge fan. Follow,
Yeah,
so
exactly.
it opens up so many doors if it's done right. And so I think
Yeah.
people have to just invest the time and the resources to make sure that it's done right. And if it's done right, it can be life changing for sure.
I love this part of the conversation. Not honestly, not because we're talking about keynote speakers, but making sure that that message gets out there, because you can have a great story with no message, and you can have a message that doesn't have the story to
Yep.
carry it. And
Yep.
when you get both, it's just magic, and it can be A-list or lesser known. And ultimately, whether it's BetterUp or any of the other organizations that you work with or that I work with, that's ultimately what it is, because it's the spaces to create these meaningful connections that are ultimately going to transform lives.
Absolutely.
We've come to the end of our conversation. I really do feel, Tavar, that we left something on the table. We can come back and visit, maybe do your yearly checkup,
Absolutely.
if
I'd
you
love to.
will. No
Yeah.
poking and prodding, but just kind of a little status report of how it's gone and what you've been able to bring forth and expand upon this great mission with BetterUp. So just thank you for your generosity of spirit. Thank you for continuing to be a guiding light in the events industry, and just really taking your time to be with us today. So I really appreciate it.
It was a wonderful conversation, and I'd come back anytime to do it again. So I'd love to come back.
And for our return listeners and viewers, thank you so much for continuing to trust us and come back for a place and a destination, a space for learning and expanding. And for our first timers, thank you for coming and giving us a chance, and share alike about our podcast with your neighbor, your postman, your pharmacist, your gardener, your grocer, your anybody and everybody that you run into, because you'll be smarter for it.